Someone asked their boss's cardiologist about dental benefits, naturally.
Okay, wait, the lanyard was genuinely confusing. I stand by that completely.
I am still mortified, and it happened 3 months ago, proper scarred for life.
Inspired by the kind of story you'd find on Reddit, today's tale asks one very simple question. What happens when you walk into a hospital, mistake a doctor for someone from HR, and ask them, in front of your boss, whether the redundancy package includes dental?
I cannot believe we are telling this story. I am still mortified, like properly mortified. Every time I think about it, I want to crawl under something and never come back out.
Okay, but in my defense, and I have a defense, I genuinely have a defense, the man was wearing a lanyard. Sophie, he had a lanyard. That is 100% a workplace thing.
To set the scene, Sophie and Jake both work at a mid-sized marketing company in Newcastle. Their boss, a rather serious woman named, well, let's say the director, had been off sick for 2 weeks. The whole office was tense. Rumors had been flying about restructuring, about redundancies, about the future of their entire department. And then, one Wednesday morning, Sophie received a message.
She messaged me personally. The director said she was still in hospital for a follow-up appointment, and would I mind popping by to drop off some contracts she needed to sign. Official company stuff. I was dead nervous, honestly, she's quite formidable, so I asked Jake to come with me for moral support.
Which, okay, looking back, was probably the beginning of the end. But Sophie, you asked me. You literally said, Jake, please come, I can't do this alone.
I meant for moral support. I did not mean for you to start a full-on workplace negotiation with a cardiologist.
They arrived at the hospital around 10:30 in the morning. Sophie had the contracts in a neat folder. Jake had, apparently, also been doing some thinking on the journey over.
Okay, so here's the thing. There had been all this talk, right, about redundancies and redundancy. For anyone who doesn't know, that's when a company lets people go not because of anything you did wrong, but because the role itself is being cut. Like, the job disappears. And I'd heard that the director was actually the one making the final call on who stays and who goes. So I thought, she's in hospital, she's probably bored, she's going to be in a chatty mood. This is actually a perfect moment to, like, professionally advocate for myself.
He told me this in the lift on the way up, and I said, Jake, do not bring up redundancies in the hospital. That is not the time. And he said, what did you say, Jake?
I said there's never a bad time to manage your own career trajectory, which I stand by the way.
Career trajectory, in a cardiology ward, unbelievable.
They found the right ward, knocked on the correct door, and the director was indeed there, sitting up in bed, looking, by all accounts, rather more human than she did behind her glass office. There was a man in the room standing near the window, writing on a clipboard. He was wearing a white coat and a lanyard.
Okay, so here, this is where I have to explain my thinking. The lanyard. It had one of those little badge holders on it, right? And from where I was standing, I could not read what it said. And I thought, clipboard, lanyard, official looking, this has to be someone from HR. Because HR people always have clipboards and lanyards. That is just a universal constant.
Jake, he was in a white coat.
Some HR people dress smart.
Not that smart.
Sophie handed over the contracts. The director signed them. The conversation was going perfectly well. It was professional, efficient, one might even say it was going to plan. And then Jake cleared his throat.
I saw an opening, you know. The director seemed relaxed. The guy with the clipboard was just standing there, and I thought, okay, I'm going to be proactive. Because being proactive, that means taking initiative, doing things without being told, not waiting around. That's something my old manager always said was my best quality. So I turned to the clipboard guy and I said, excuse me, while I've got you, I actually had a question about the redundancy package. Does it include dental coverage?
I wanted to dissolve. I genuinely wanted to dissolve into the floor tiles. The director's face, oh, her face. She went from relaxed to, I don't even have a word for it. And the man with the clipboard looked at Jake and said, very slowly, I'm Dr. Whitmore, I'm her cardiologist. And there was this silence, this massive, echoing silence.
And I said, and honestly, this is where I made it worse. I said, oh, wow, great to meet you. Do you liaise with HR at all?
Liaise, he said, liaise to a cardiologist in a hospital room.
For our listeners, to liaise means to communicate and cooperate with someone in another department or organization. It's a very common workplace English word. It is not, however, typically directed at heart specialists during their rounds.
In my mind, it made sense. I was trying to find a bridge, a connection, I was networking. Networking is a skill.
Networking is a skill, yes. Networking with your boss's heart doctor about dental benefits is not networking. That is a breakdown.
The doctor, to his credit, handled it with remarkable composure. He explained gently that he wasn't involved in employment matters and perhaps Jake might want to follow up with the appropriate department. The director said nothing. She simply looked at Jake with an expression that Sophie later described as, and I'm quoting here,
dead-eyed, just completely dead-eyed, like she was filing him away in a mental folder labeled "deal with later."
I tried to recover. I said, I just want to flag that I've been really focused on my performance targets this quarter. Because like performance targets, those are the specific goals your employer sets for you to hit, right? So they can measure how well you're doing, and I thought if I could just redirect to my actual work output.
Jake, she was attached to a heart monitor.
The monitor was fine. The numbers were fine.
The numbers went up, Jake. I saw them. The numbers on the monitor went up when you mentioned performance targets.
Sophie made the executive decision to leave. Immediately, she gathered the signed contracts, apologized to both the director and doctor. Whitmore, on behalf of, quote, my colleague who hasn't slept, and guided Jake into the corridor by the elbow.
I had slept fine. I was fully rested. That was a lie, Sophie.
It was a diplomatic lie. There's a difference. In the workplace, being diplomatic, choosing your words carefully so you don't cause offense is a survival skill, which you, Jake, do not have.
I'm working on it.
In the lift going down, Sophie apparently didn't speak for a full 40 seconds. Jake counted.
I was trying to give her time to process. I've read that when someone is overwhelmed, you should give them space before debriefing. And debriefing, that's when you go over what happened after an event, review it together, is actually really healthy for team communication.
He started debriefing me in the hospital car park, using the word debrief out loud.
I thought the debrief went well, actually.
I walked to the bus stop without him.
Back at the office, the story spread, as these things do, with remarkable speed. By 3 o'clock, the entire floor knew that Jake had attempted to negotiate his redundancy package with a cardiologist. The phrase, "does it include dental?" became, for a period of several weeks, a sort of unofficial team motto.
My colleague printed it on a mug, an actual mug. It sat on the kitchen counter for a month. I'd go in to make tea and there it was. "Does it include dental?" with a little tooth emoji.
Honestly, I thought the mug was kind of funny.
You would.
Now the question everyone is surely asking, did Jake face any professional consequences? Was he, in fact, made redundant?
No, and I genuinely think, that my willingness to advocate for myself, even in an unconventional setting, showed a kind of confident initiative that the director actually respected. Like she kept me on. I'm still there.
She kept him on because he's brilliant at his job and she needed him. It had naught to do with the hospital visit. She told me, in a one-to-one, that's a private meeting between a manager and an employee. By the way, she told me, Sophie, your colleague is very talented and completely unmanageable, and I've decided those two things cancel each other out.
See, talented, she said talented.
She also said unmanageable, Jake.
I'm choosing to focus on the positive feedback. That's a healthy mindset.
There is, as there often is in these stories, a small postscript. 3 months later, the company did finalize its redundancy process. Jake was not included. However, HR did send around a memo asking all staff to please refrain from approaching executives during medical appointments to discuss employment terms. The memo did not name names. It didn't need to.
Every single person in that office knew. The memo was practically addressed to Jake. It might as well have had a little tooth emoji on it.
A memo, right? Just for our listeners, that's an official written message sent around a workplace, usually to communicate a policy or remind people of something important. And mine was basically a memo. A memo inspired by me. That's a kind of legacy.
That is not a legacy, Jake. That is a cautionary tale.
Legends and cautionary tales are basically the same thing told from different angles.
And that is where we leave today's story. A hospital visit, a man with a clipboard, and one extremely ambitious question about dental coverage.
If that made you laugh or cringe, honestly, either reaction is valid. Drop us a like. It genuinely helps the channel more than you'd think.
Follow us so you never miss another story like this one. There are dead good episodes coming, and I'd hate for you to miss them.
Subscribe to English Through Stories, new episodes every week, and every one of them will improve your English without you even noticing.
See you on the next one, and remember, always check the lanyard before you start negotiating.